Hi, my name is Stephanie Wills, and I am joining the board meeting this evening to talk a little bit about religion in schools and current trends. The purpose of my presentation is also to review the laws and trends that pertain to religion in schools and determine if we need to change any policies or procedures that we are currently using. Our current policy is pretty limited and only discusses holiday parties and holiday activities as it pertains to students in the classroom. Americans continue to fight over religion in schools and classrooms, and this issue remains an important battleground in the broader conflict over religion's roles in public life. First thing I wanted to do was kind of go over a couple resources that I was looking at. The first one is the U.S. Department of Education 2021. It describes several different things. The first was talking about the First Amendment, which prevents governments from establishing religion and protects religious expression and activity from government interference and discrimination. The next one that was mentioned was Section 8524A of the Elementary and Secondary Education Act, also known as ESEA Act of 1965, which requires the Secretary to issue guidance to state educational agencies, local educational agencies, and the public on prayer in public schools. 852A to receive funds under ESEA, the Elementary and Secondary Education Act, schools must certify in writing to the state educational agency that the local educational agency doesn't deny participation in protected prayer. Another thing that was mentioned was Equal Access Act. This was designed to ensure that religious activities are given the same access to federally funded public secondary school facilities as other student activities. For example, if another group that maybe is outside of the school, parents as teachers, Head Start, anything like that, that wanted to come in and use a room in the school and they had access to that, the same access should be given to the religious group as well. Schools may dismiss students to attend off-premise religious instructions provided the school does not encourage or discourage participation or penalize the students for attending or not attending. The next resource that I looked at was the Pew Research Center 2019. This article really talked a little bit more about some of the court cases that involved religion in schools, and I just wanted to touch on a couple. The first one was Ingall versus Vitale, 1962. This was the Supreme Court held the Establishment Clause prohibited school-sponsored prayer in public schools, and just really talked about that schools, teachers, for instance, principals, are not allowed to lead prayer in the classroom or in the school. And it also mentioned that only 8% of teens in public schools have ever seen a teacher lead a class in prayer. The next case was Abington School District versus Chimp, 1963. This case was about school sponsorship of religious exercises violates the Constitution. So talking about giving parents more of the rights on their children's religious upbringing and not having the school be able to talk about that and push parents into any religious preference one way or another. The next one talked about Santa Fe Independent School District versus Doe, 2000, and schools may not sponsor student recited prayer at high school football games. And there was also a case where that happened. One of the football coach did get fired for doing such a thing. So the teacher or the coach cannot be the one that's leading up the prayer in those situations. The next thing I wanted to kind of talk about is that the conflict of religion in schools affects many aspects of the public education, including curriculum, athletics, student clubs, dress code, graduation ceremonies, all of those things. So I just wanted to take a deeper look into each one of those and several other aspects of the school day and activities that may be happening in the school that may relate or have religion tied to them in some way. So the first thing I wanted to talk about, and information I got from the U.S. Department of Education, was prayer. They talked about in that article that students may organize See You at the Pole gatherings, prayer groups, and religious clubs to the same extent other non-curricular activities are organized. Also said that students may pray with fellow students or talk about prayer as they would engage in conversation about any topic. So they are allowed just to talk about that with kids as they would be talking about anything, whether it be politics, sports, anything like that. Students may include prayer in graduation speeches, and schools may offer their facilities for baccalaureate ceremonies, but they may not mandate or organize such activities. Another thing that kind of looked at was the Pledge of Allegiance. This was quite interesting that there were many different cases that kind of went back and forth on that. The first one was Myers versus Lunden County Public Schools, 2005. The Fourth U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals upheld the recitation of the pledge in Virginia. And then a little bit after that, Michael Newdow versus the Public Schools, the U.S. District Court in California, ruled the other way, saying that they should not be allowed to recite the pledge. Then, in 2010, the U.S. Circuit Courts of Appeals ruled that the recitation of the pledge did not constitute an establishment of religion, so it was okay for people to recite the pledge in their classroom. Another one I wanted to look at was curriculum. The U.S. Department of Education gave this information, some of this information, and the Pew Research Center gave also some more information. First, from the Pew Research Center, public schools may teach the Bible and literature if they include lessons about the roles of religion and religious institutions in history, or offer courses on comparative religions. The teaching of intelligent design and creationism violate the Establishment Clause because they are religious rather than a scientific theory, so using those to teach in science classes is not prohibited, is not allowed, is prohibited. The next one is information I got from the U.S. Department of Education. Students may express their beliefs about religion in homework free from discrimination, and talking about that in the classroom. And the next thing I wanted to talk about a little bit was dress code. And schools have the discretion in adopting policies related to dress code. Students may display religious messages on clothing in the same way that they would display other messages like Nike, Adidas, or any other saying that they would put. So they have the right to do that as well. And then once we're talking about the things that are happening in the school as far as religion and activities, I also want to talk about the rights that students, employees, and parents have. First, I want to talk about students. The Pew Research Center gave some examples of rights that we have for students. Students acting on their own have the right to engage in religious activities and discussions. Students may offer a prayer or blessing before meals in schools or assemble on school grounds. Students may not engage in religious harassment of others or compel other students to participate in religious expressions, and schools may neither favor nor disfavor students on the basis of their religious identities. Staff also has rights when it comes to religion as part of the school. The first one is when off-duty, employees may engage in worship or any lawful faith-based activity. Staff are permitted, just as students, to wear religious clothing or jewelry, and however, staff may not push their religious beliefs on students during class time. Now talking about the rights for parents. Parents have the right to shape and control the education of their children. Parents may gain permission for their children to opt out of activities that may conflict with religious beliefs, such as holiday programs, holiday parties, anything like that. So my recommendations after going through all this information on religions in schools and the current trends is that we look into our policies and maybe add some guidelines to protect our staff, students, and our school. Here are the references that I talked about in this presentation: the Pew Research Center and U.S. Department of Education. And then I kind of wanted to go over outcome CLO 6.3. The correlation with this assignment is it correlates with the outcome because it gave me the opportunity to evaluate information and communicate my findings with my school board about laws, rights, and policies that affect student and adult well-being in a neutral way. This assignment also helped open more communication about religion in the school, and by starting this process, we will be able to review our policies on a more consistent basis and feel more confident and comfortable talking about religion in our school. It was very relevant to my position right now as a coordinator of our organization. I'm not very familiar at all with the laws about religion in school, so I learned a lot about what students and staff and the school as a whole can and cannot do. And as I reflect on this assignment, it gave me some really good information that I can now use in my position. I would like to start by working with the school board and other stakeholders to develop more specific guidelines to address religion in our schools. I would also like to include this information when doing onboarding with my new staff and at staff meetings. At least once a year, I'd like to go over this information with my staff to help build their professional capacity and to help them make decisions and to understand our legal responsibilities. Thank you for listening to my presentation.